Brought to you by Dale Carnegie of Orange County. This is the 411 on Leadership podcast, where we discuss common sense leadership practices with executives in Southern California to transform you into the leader people want to follow.
Well, good Monday, June morning. We've got a little bit of June gloom here, but that doesn't stop us from getting together, talking a little bit about leadership and what that means to us as leaders. Also, this is, as always, brought to you by Sitch Radio. Make sure that you check out Sitch Radio and the man, the myth, the legend, Brian Colburn, who gets it done. If you've thought about podcasting, interested in it, or haven't even thought about it at all, but you've got ideas, talk to Brian. He'll get it together. And today I don't have Steve with me. Shout out to Steve Thomas. He's got some other obligations taking place, and he's an awesome guy. Always miss it when Steve's not here, although it's only been, I think, one other time. But today I've got a good friend of mine, Kurt Blake, who is joining us. Let me tell you a little bit about Kirk and why I brought him in here today. Let me say hi to you.
Did you just call me Kirk?
Kurt.
You called me Kirk.
Did I say?
It's
did I
all
say
good.
Kirk? I said Kurt.
It's okay,
Kurt.
man.
Oh, Kurt.
We're good friends.
I pulled this Steve.
It's
Steve
all
does
good.
that. He
Go ahead,
always
man.
talks about how he needs more coffee.
Didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
It's all good. Kurt and I have known each other for probably close to 20 years. And Kurt, K-U-R-T, has decades of experience in commercial lending. He's associate vice president, commercial lending. He's been involved in radio, been involved in the music industry, all around
nonprofit
sector, and has come in and joined us today to talk about how leaders need to be strategic. And this is something that I know that not only do you use in your own work experience there, but you get to consult with leaders. I mean, because you're, as a vice president of commercial lending, you're not just giving money away to any Tom, Dick, or Harry, or Susie, or Sally, or whoever. They've got to be able to experience some strategic thinking and what they're doing as an organization. So that's something that you've had a lot of experience with.
It's something that as you talk about like nature versus nurture, it's one of those things. I think as you think through life and as you gain more experience, you start to realize that the way that you think is not necessarily the way everybody else thinks. That was kind of a revelation for me about 10 years ago. Through some key learnings that I did, learning, that my particular personality type, the way my brain is wired, I have this tendency towards strategy that maybe not every person in the room does. There's lots of great giftings that other people have that I don't have. Right. But strategy is kind of a place that I've settled on, and it's funny. We were talking yesterday about kind of the analogy that came to my mind, and it's a little bit of a vignette into my childhood. Is like this idea of people would come over on a Saturday and ask my dad to borrow a tool. And I think the people that he didn't like, he would just be like, "Here's the tool. See you later. Hey, you got a pipe wrench.
Here's a hammer.
Here's a pipe wrench. See you later." But the people that he really liked, or the people that he really just kind of sought to serve, he would ask like these kind of probing questions, because a lot of times, as our culture is more and more obsessed with like innovation and creation of new ideas and products and technologies. A lot of times people will start to solve a problem, and they'll get 2 or 3 steps into solving a problem, and they'll go, "Okay, now I need this tool," and they'll go and ask for a tool. So my dad, salt of the earth guy, just worked 25 years at a power generating plant. Awesome guy, intelligent, oftentimes the smartest guy in the room, but he would just ask people like, "Well, okay, like I've got a monkey wrench you can borrow, but like, what are you trying to do?" His 2 favorite things, I always give him a hard time about this, is, what you should have done is, or I'll tell you what you do here, it's probably why when he retired, he worked at Home Depot for a couple of years.
There you go.
But yeah, so just kind of growing up, just kind of seeing this give and take of like, let me ask a couple more probing questions to see if you're trying to answer the right question.
Okay.
That's kind of how my brain's wired. And so I don't know,
well, and you talked about kind of getting through that realization. One of the things is that we as leaders, a lot of times we grow into a leadership role.
Sure.
We've got some competencies and whoever's above us at that point sees that we've got ability to get things done, work well with people, problem solve, task, whatever it is. And then we get put in these roles. And a lot of times we're kind of, the idea of caught versus taught. Like, I'm just kind of on the job experience. And you and I were talking about that. Part of the realization of finding the ability to say, wow, I do think differently than others. I do have that strategic bent. I'm going to stop and look at things, was actually taking like a personality test, like to what, like strengths, where are some of my leadership abilities?
Yeah. So it's, it's interesting. Like, I think maybe 5 or 7 years into my career, I kind of got dubbed a little bit as like the maybe like does not play well with others. But the reason was, because of this, my two kind of strongest strengths are strategic and belief, right? And so I would show up to group sessions having already thought through the process and believing very strongly that my way was like the right way to do things, which could tend to lead to a little bit of conflict. But as I started to discover that about myself, it's like, oh, okay, this is a tool I need to use. I might need to pull it back in certain areas. And this is a tool I can bring to the table for the team that doesn't need to be a source of frustration for me, but actually needs to be used as an asset. And so a lot of times when people think about strategy, they think like 5 to 10 years down the road, where's an organization heading? What are we shooting for? And I think even on
sales goals or growth goals.
I think even on the list of potential topics you sent me, I think strategic was like strategic / visionary.
Yeah.
But for me, strategy is so much more important to like the task that I'm doing today. Am I asking the right questions? Is this even a question worth answering?
Yeah.
Is this even a project worth completing? Is this even a task worth solving? And
right.
Like the common scenario that this will come into play is like a customer will call and say, hey, does your software allow me to do X, Y, and Z? And you can just say like, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't.
Right.
Or a little bit more probing will reveal like they're trying to solve a problem that they have and they're doing it through a little bit of ignorance, maybe a little bit of misinformation.
They've heard something and that's that sounds like what I could use.
Yeah, exactly. And so, it's they're already 4 or 5 steps into a process. This happens with project management. This happens with new product rollouts.
Right.
This happens with customers. And it's like, let's go back to square one and determine, are we even asking the right question to begin with?
Right. Well, and you were talking about the illustration earlier, even with your dad, like when that adage, when your hammer's the only tool you have, every problem looks like a nail.
Yeah.
And well, obviously we know that that's not the case all the time. So what is it that we're trying to solve? And so you told me there's a question that you ask every time that you go into a situation. And what is that?
Yeah, it's what's my objective, or what's your objective? What's the objective of this meeting? What's the, it really is, what's the question we're trying to answer? Why are we here? You called me to a meeting at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning, and we're going to spend the next hour talking about something, right?
Right.
You thought it was important for my time and your time and everybody else in the meeting to come to the table and talk about this. Like, it's incumbent upon you as the meeting organizer, as the project sponsor, as the project manager, whatever,
as a department leader, as whatever,
to be able to clearly articulate what the objective is, and to even be humble enough to know when you've got the objective wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, humility in a lot of these cases. There's the classic example of, the story he's sharing with you about the project manager who broke down in tears because she literally put 3 months into a project and came to kind of the like 85%, mark, and wanted to check in with, some of the customer facing employees and, hey, this is what we've designed so far. Anything you think we should change? And she found out that one of the assumptions the entire project was built on was a faulty assumption. And, the typical disconnect, leaders, if you're listening to this, your customer facing employees are going to know so much more relevant data about how their job impacts your customers than you are. Having the humility to say, you know what, I don't do this job every single day. I know your employees' time is valuable, but you have to pull them in and say, hey, the manual says we do it this way, but I know there's maybe some shortcuts or some changes that you guys have made on the fly to massage this process into one that actually works. Let's start from there. Let's build our assumptions based off of actual reality,
Right.
instead of stated reality, what's in the manual.
What's in the manual, or the leader, whoever. I've done that before. This is the way we did it 10 years ago.
Because what happens a lot of times is, you end up with all of these projects that were completed, all of these products that were introduced into the marketplace. And because they were built on faulty assumptions, they're tried out for 90 days, they're tried out for 6 months. And then either the customer or the staff go, this isn't working. This doesn't represent what we
or the market has moved beyond by the time, because you're solving an old problem.
Exactly. If you've ever implemented a CRM and had your sales team struggle to adopt it, or if you've ever come up with what you thought was going to be an amazing product and it didn't meet your customer's expectation, it's usually because of that, like, what's my objective question?
Yeah. Once again, on this Monday morning, John Campbell here with a 411 on leadership, and our guest this morning, Kurt Blake, the Associate Vice President, Commercial Lending. And we're talking through leaders being strategic, and what does that mean for you on a daily basis? And here's one of those nuggets that we've already talked about this morning, is asking that question, what is my objective? Sometimes we assume that everybody in the room knows the answer to that, right? Because it's all in my head, and we get into the room and you've got 5, 10, 15 people. What is it we're trying to get out of this? And I think as a leader, no matter what area that we're in, you can be the CEO all the way down to, a team lead on the front facing side. What is our objective and what we're doing in any aspect of that work scenario? So, what do you think, Kurt, when you are in that process and you realize, and one of the things you mentioned, and you said you got labeled that doesn't work well with others, because it sounds like you were willing to ask the questions and saying, what are we doing this for?
And not like in a confrontational way, not like in like a way of like, what the heck are we doing? But like, I think my brain's just wired to say like, whoa, hold on a second. Let's slow down, and let's actually make sure we can articulate why we're doing what we're doing. We all have the ability as business leaders to call amazing things, into existence. Things, whether it's a project or a product, or even just something as simple as a meeting. And like I said, it's incumbent upon us to be able to, at a moment's notice, clearly and carefully articulate exactly why we're doing it, and to know, and I think that humility piece that I spoke about earlier, that's probably the most important thing, because a bad project, a bad product, just to take it across the finish line, just to complete, that's the Project Manager Full Employment Act of 2021. Nobody likes being involved in those,
right?
But there is a momentum that these projects and these products get, where it's like, all right, we've already spent this many man hours, we've already got this many FTEs committed to this.
We want to celebrate something.
We got to see this through, and you just have to be bold and have the courage to say, you know what, this thing's a dud, or we started out
under a faulty assumption,
wrong foundation.
We're 1 degree off the beginning, and we've gotten to a point.
And we're 5 miles off the target.
There's that product or project management term, scope creep. That comes into play all the time. And it went from solving this to, now we're solving the whole organizational problem. That's not what we're into. Our objective is to get A done, and we're talking C, D, and F over here.
Absolutely. And then the other component that is equally as frustrating is when you get to a point where the project's been implemented. I've got, like I said, I've got binders full of projects, binders full of product brochures of stuff that just never got implemented. And it's because people don't have the courage a lot of times at the 30-day, the 60-day, maybe the 6-month mark to come back and say, okay, we brought this thing into existence. A, is it working? B, if not, why? C, what do we need to change about it?
Well, and two things. One is it ties into, is we typically refer to Dale Carnegie principles, and one of them is, when you're wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically. We all know, we've experienced those situations, and I know you're a parent, I'm a parent. When our kids, when we're talking to them about a disciplinary situation, when we ask them, did you take that cookie? No, Dad, I didn't take the cookie. Well, there were 6, now there's 5. I didn't eat it, Mom didn't eat it.
Right.
You ate it. Okay, Dad. Okay, so now you've done 2 things wrong.
Right.
If you would have admitted it first, we would have gotten through this. But now
Absolutely.
you've lied about it.
Yeah.
Now you've carried on a situation. And so we've talked about when we're wrong, when we find out that we're in a position, being able to, well, and that goes back to corporate culture, right?
Yeah.
Do we have a culture where people are willing to challenge and admit a problem? That's being strategic.
Absolutely.
Have you
Yep.
designed a situation where your team is willing and able to stand up and say, this is wrong, this is bad, or it's not getting it done? But then the second, when you and I were talking earlier, Kurt, was not only asking that question, what's our objective? But then the second part of being strategic, you had mentioned something about following up with that.
Yeah, just like I said, or just coming back around, and I think the best leaders that I've worked under are the ones who are not the prototypical like my way or the highway, but like,
Okay.
you know what, I made a mistake here. Let's course correct. Let's keep moving forward. Because those are the leaders that you develop respect for.
Right.
Those are the people that you get excited to work for. Nobody likes being told to do a task that they know is not going to make the organization effective. But an organization where the top down leadership is humble and they're able to admit when they've made a mistake, man, sign me up as a place I'd like to work. Because that's where you can really collaborate at a level that your ideas are heard and you're actually making an impact. You're actually doing meaningful work.
Well, and I think you tied in a couple of those things as we're looking at a strategic leader. And if you've got questions for Kurt or for us in the discussion today, please make sure that you comment, leave a message. We'll see those and we'll be able to incorporate that into today's show, or even later down the road, we can follow up with you on those. But as we're looking at being a strategic leader, we're asking that question. And that's one of those things that I appreciate is, man, that's something that's easy to implement today. What's my objective? And then planning into the process, the project, whatever it is, do we have a 30-day, a 60-day, a 6-month follow back around? And I think you touched on some of the other part of that. We've all been through those corporate redesigns or project implementations.
Absolutely.
And there's no accountability.
Yeah.
One of the big ones that you and I partnered in on once, what we implemented a massive CRM project. Yep. And if any of you have been out there, you've been involved in CRM, data is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And having protocols around how you capture, implement, and use data is extremely important. Nothing worse than pulling a report and you got half the data, or you got way too much because it wasn't segmented out right. So having those in place. And a lot of that falls on accountability.
Yeah,
Are you holding your team accountable to what we said we were going to do and how we're going to do it? Because if not, we're going to fall back into those situations how it was before.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So, kind of lifelong sales guy here. CRM is either the best tool for a sales guy,
or the bane of your existence.
Or it's like it's just the thing that doesn't work. And those times I've been involved with those, I would say squishy rollouts of like a new standard or a new system. Those are just like, they're never successful. You mentioned being a parent. If I told my kids, hey, Saturday morning before we go outside and play, we really need to make sure our rooms are clean. And then I never, ever check to make sure that their rooms are clean, or, I only enforce it like 25% of the time. Guess what? A year later, nobody's room is getting cleaned, right? It's the same thing with CRM and things like that. It's like, the company, the organization has spent millions of dollars. We've invested in this. And I think this goes a little bit to the flip side of what we were talking about is like knowing and admitting when you're wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes even when you're wrong, you still have to, you still have to bear out the consequences.
Yeah.
So, CRM's a great example of like, hey, you know what? I get it. You don't like it, but like, this is what we're stuck with.
Right.
We spent $5 million on this system.
We got to make it work.
You have to make it work, or guess what? You don't work here. And I think the dynamic in leadership today, especially with like COVID and the work from home and all the flexibility, there's this dynamic of just like, let's cater to the worker. Let's do as much as we can to kind of coddle, sometimes the worker, because human resources are valuable resources, but yeah, the other side of it is like, yeah, we were wrong. So what? We still have to do this, we're not going back in time. It's that accountability of not kind of soft rolling out a lot of these programs. Like I said, I've been a part of those like squishy rollouts, and guess what? Nobody actually conforms to the new system until you tell them, okay, this is the date you absolutely have to.
And there's consequences if we don't do that.
Absolutely.
You can tie, like you said, it's not work here, or maybe you tie other incentives to that. If
the report doesn't have this data, you don't get your compensation for that sale.
We as a team have service level agreements that we're going to get to. If we get 80%, if we get 90%, whatever that is, you as a leader, there's lots of different ways. And sometimes team accountability is as important as the individual accountability, because I don't know if you've ever been involved with situations where you got the names on the board and you can kind of see where everybody's at. You never want to be at the bottom.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of incentive to that, to say, hey, here's what we're going to do as a team, as a department, as whatever, to be able to get to those levels. And as a strategic thinker, you've got to be able to account for those and to plan for that.
Yeah. And I think too, like the idea of accountability, like, it really goes to how is your organization structured? I mean, if you're a sole proprietor, 100% owner of the business, like great. You don't need accountability. It's your way or the highway. And like, you are free to run your business however you want.
Your bank account is your accountability.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And, and like, that is the beauty. And that's so much of what's made our country and our economy great, is this like risk taker profile.
Yeah.
It's all on me. And maybe some of the stuff we've talked about so far doesn't apply in that scenario, but man, as soon as a board of directors is involved, as soon as multiple layers of management are involved, that's when you do get to this point of like, okay, accountability is key, and bringing it back to strategy. How'd you get 6 months into a project and not know you were shooting at the right target? How does that happen?
Absolutely.
But classic examples of these things is, I think over the last 20 years, the other day I was sitting with a project manager, and she wanted to kind of get some subject matter expert information from me. Hey, I'm working on this project. I just need to know about this particular process that you do as part of your job. And so she's peppering me with these questions. And again, hey, why are we doing this? Like, I'm happy to help you out with this information.
Right.
Willing to be generous with my time. Clearly you need to know this. And clearly, I'm one of, a dozen people who can help you with this. So thanks for asking me, but what is your particular objective in your project? Come to find out, she's trying to solve a problem that's not really, I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a problem, but I told her, if you gave me 20 problems that I wanted you to solve, this wouldn't even be in the top 20. And she was like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And she had this impression that she was just, by fixing this particular aspect, was just going to add layers of efficiency to what we were doing. And it was not even on my radar, and I'm one of the, the top producing guys, within the organization. And so just that disparity of like, how do you think that
the target wasn't there?
Yeah.
Got one piece of information or heard one thing, took a chance to go for it when you're like, okay.
Or really, what in this case, what it came down to is, there's one particular person who didn't like this process, was really, really vocal about it.
Okay.
And the assumption is, well, if so-and-so is really vocal about this, everybody else must feel the same way.
Gotcha.
Let's design a project.
The squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Kurt, you could have been squeaking a little bit more. No,
I think I was busy doing business.
We did have a question come in, even though Steve's not with us in person. Shout out to Steve for being a part of the show. Thanks so much. He's asking the question, what's your approach, Kurt, or strategy to ensure that members of your team are valued moving forward? So as a strategic thinker, how do we get the team valued and incorporated and participating?
That's okay. I'm a little bit of a unicorn in that I've been 18 years at the same organization. Okay. So I think the kind of the typical, career path is maybe a little bit more stops along the way.
Yeah.
So I have the ability in my position to go, okay, I've done that job that this person sitting across the table from me is trying to accomplish.
Right.
I've been, the sales support rep, or I've been the loan processor. I kind of learned the business piecemeal along the way.
Yeah.
So I have this ability to remember, as I've looked through my career, hey, what was it like being in that person's shoes? And I think this is so difficult for some leaders to slow down and remember what it was like when you're fresh out of college, or remember what it was like when you were, that newly married, couple, or you just had your first child, and I mean, everybody remembers that in a general sense, but with empathy and compassion, to be able to call somebody higher, to hold them accountable, but at the same time, to do that in a way that respects who they are as a person, respects who they are as a not just a piece of this machine, this
not just
corporate
a tool.
machine. Yeah, it's not just, we call it human resources,
right.
but humans are not resources. There are people there, and so I'm always trying to slow down and go, okay, am I making assumptions about what this person should know based on what I knew when I was in their shoes? Do I need to check in frequently to make sure that they're understanding what I'm saying? I mean, it's typical, public speaking kind of tools you would normally do. Check for understanding a lot of times. And then inviting people into things that they probably have no business being involved in is a fun way of doing this, of hey, come with me to this meeting. I just want you to sit and listen. I want you to be a part of this process, and
hear what's going on at the next level, or this important decision making. That's fantastic.
And I think people will, they'll either naturally they'll either naturally kind of raise to that level, or you'll find out pretty quickly, hey, they're fine where they are, and that's okay. Not everybody is going to progress through an organization at the same pace. Not everybody desires to even do that, and so and that's fine, but being able to kind of quickly identify that and still value that person for their contribution where they're at, but again, call them higher when it's appropriate.
And
great question.
Yeah, and one of the things is we're looking at resourcing leaders. We've linked an article to the show. You'll see that in the show notes there, and it's unmistakable signs that you're a strategic thinker. And one of those is strategic thinkers make better decisions by being more reflective. You touched on that, Kurt, to say you need to be able to stop, look at where we're going. Are we getting to where we want to go? Right. And it's funny because we always think about that. If you're going hiking and you have a map, you got to check the map every once in a while to make sure you're going where you want to go.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of the same idea. And there's a whole series of questions that they include there. And strategic thinkers advance their careers by being better leaders. So how do I reflect, look at myself? Am I doing the things that I want to do? There's a series of questions to ask yourself there. And then the third one is strategic thinkers demonstrate organizational value by creating more strategic thinkers. And I think you touched on that, Kurt, by saying, how are we investing in the lives of the next person to help them to be able to think at the organizational level versus just my job level, right? Come see what some of the other discussions are taking place. How can I invest in their life and help them see broader beyond their task?
Even with this cadence of what's my objective? I will have people laugh now in meetings because that is such a go-to question for me. And so what is created is this culture of I'm going to preempt his question by making sure that I know what the objective is. And clearly articulating. I think just simple things like that, where you're allowing who you are to become a little bit more of who the culture in the organization is, rather than the other way around. Sometimes we just allow the culture to kind of dominate us and run us over. And as leaders, we set the tone. We get to be able to dictate a lot of that. And sometimes what we dictate can be toxic, and sometimes what we dictate can be amazingly helpful and life-giving to people as they're going about their day-to-day job.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And this morning here, we've been talking on the 401 on leadership is that leaders are strategic. We're talking through some of those steps and practical ideas that you as a leader can do that. One of those things, we've linked an article for you so that you can review, kind of look at those questions and self-evaluate. Am I being able to be that leader that my organization needs, that I need to be as a leader myself? And there's also, we want to make sure to highlight, there are some practical steps that you can get as far as coaching And there's a Dale Carnegie course coming up on leadership training for results. I've linked that also in the show notes, that you can take a look at some of the key aspects that you can plan and strategize around as a leader in your own development. Maybe you've got a team leader, as we were talking, Kurt, on your organization that you think is ready to take that next step, and they need some of those tools to be able to get to where they need to be. So we've got that there for you so that you can reference that. But then also, Kurt, I want to ask you today, as we're getting ready to close, to those that are listening and participating and watching right now, what's a takeaway? What's that one thing that they can step in, begin to implement today in my leadership role, tomorrow, this week, that will help me be a better strategic leader?
Yeah, I mean, it's just reiterating what we said. You could do it literally in your next meeting, not in a confrontational way, not in a rude way, but just like, hey, can you just help me out? What's our objective? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we asking the right question? Are we trying to answer the right question? And then absolutely, I mean, if you want to change an organization, that humility component of being able to say, hey, I think we missed the mark on this one. I think we missed the mark. And the only way you get there is if you do that check-in of 30 days, 60, 90, 6 months, are we doing what we hoped to accomplish? But yeah, absolutely. Having the humility to say when you missed the mark.
And own it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Own it. And even sometimes, and that's something that we see from really good leaders, are those that even if we know it wasn't their fault, if they own it, you go, wow. Because that's what, right? We typically tend to, our default is to own the successes and defer the misses.
Absolutely.
But if we say, hey, I missed it, I didn't help do A, B, and C to get us there. What can we change to do that? So thanks again this morning for joining us here on the 411 on Leadership. Thank you so much to our guest today, Kurt Blake. Appreciate you being here and joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
Hey, make sure if you enjoyed today's content, like, subscribe, share it with your friends and family. We want to provide you the leadership content that will help you become the leader people want to follow. Have a great day.